Black Myth Wukong will be out in just a few weeks on August 20th, and we've got lots of info we can piece together about this game, including some new bits like the fact that you'll be able to modify your staff with various enhancements, and that the story actually takes place after the novel the game is inspired by. There's no doubt that fast, fluid combat against lots of unique bosses is going to be Black Myth's highlight, and I'm really looking forward to that. I don't know about you, but a character's agility and fluidness of their movement and attacks makes a huge difference to me in how a game actually feels to play. So I was really pleased to hear that multiple people who played the demo at Summer Game Fest found that Black Myth does deliver on that front. The consensus is that Wukong is fast, agile, and very responsive, which is critical given that the combat loop is going to be heavily focused on precise dodge timing. As the developers themselves have stated multiple times, Black Myth is an action RPG, not a Souls-like, and while lots of action and Souls games do have block and parry mechanics, Black Myth will not have either of those. Instead, you should be prepared to do a lot of dodging, with perfect dodges resulting in a phantom outline of Wukong. Now, that ghost image won't be particularly useful early on, but it sounds like it can be upgraded later to explode when an enemy gets close to deal extra damage, which I think is a pretty cool mechanic. But the other half of the equation in combat is, of course, the enemies, and it's been clear for a long time that Black Myth will feature a huge host of awesome bosses, with the reported total number clocking in at over 80, and leaker Lunatic Ignis claiming there will be over 160 different enemy types in total, which I assume includes the bosses. But it's always hard to tell from trailer footage if enemies are balanced, so I was glad a few of the demo players mentioned they felt the enemies were challenging but also fair. And I was particularly happy to hear Austin Wood mention in his Games Radar report that he felt enemies had very few absurdly delayed dodge baiting attack animations, which I have to agree has become a bit of a repetitive trend in modern games. I take that as another promising sign that combat will be satisfying in Black Myth. But like we said, there won't be a conventional block or parry. However, you can see in this gameplay footage that there's some sort of magical shield that deflects or parries enemies, which lines up with what some of the demo players said about a parry-like mechanic being unlockable later on. And in that same gameplay footage, we can also see the staff being spun to deflect arrows, and Wukong actually throwing it and having it return like a boomerang. So even though it sounds like we'll be limited to the staff as our only weapon, it does seem very versatile with a number of abilities and also possibly some equipable enhancements, which we'll talk about in a second. We're going to break down a bunch more details about the combat system, but first let's zoom out for a second and talk about the overall game design. Despite the devs saying Black Myth isn't a Souls-like, it does have a number of Souls-like elements. A focus on fighting unique tough bosses, bonfire-like fast travel points called incense shrines where you can rest and perform upgrades, a healing gourd with limited charges, and stamina and mana bars to manage. There are also no difficulty options, but it's also not an open world. Instead, it'll be what I would call wide linear, similar to say God of War 2018 and Ragnarok. Fortunately, it sounds like there will be at least a good number of branching corridors to explore, because a few of the demo players discovered there are bosses and mini-bosses you can actually miss. For example, Guangxi, who's this fiery wolf you've probably seen in gameplay footage, is actually a missable boss, which is pretty interesting because beating him unlocks a spell that lets you transform into him and use his abilities. So it sounds like you'll definitely need to do some exploring to make sure you don't miss new abilities and other rewards. Now, the devs did also state that there are some larger, more open areas later in the game that haven't been revealed yet. I'm imagining something like the crater in God of War Ragnarok, which was one of my favorite areas in that game, and it definitely felt refreshing after running down corridors for so long. So I hope we get something similar in Black Myth. It's also clear that most of the gameplay we've seen takes place in the starting region, called Blackwind Mountain, which consists of lush mountain forests, but there are 3 other confirmed regions: Purple Cloud Mountain, an autumn forest, Thunder Temple, which seems to be a snowy biome, likely where you'll face this white dragon we've seen in trailer footage, and Yellow Sand Ridge, which is supposedly a desert biome that we've seen very little, if any, footage of. But one of my biggest concerns, which I think you might share, is what this game consists of outside of boss fights. Some of the demo players described their 2.5-hour session as a boss rush, where they only encountered a few basic mobs while running between boss arenas. Now, to be fair, the devs also said the demo was a modified modified version of the first region, and that some of the bosses they faced were part of much lengthier side quests, and the demo basically shortcutted you straight to them. So yeah, they probably packed in as many boss fights as possible into this demo to show these reporters cool stuff, which makes sense, but even if that was the goal, I'd say actively choosing to cut out the parts between boss fights is still a bit concerning. We haven't really seen much gameplay footage outside of boss fights either, and the bits we have do seem to be fairly empty and I would argue feel a bit lifeless. I also haven't heard anything about environmental puzzles or other activities. So I hope I'm wrong, but I have a nagging feeling we might be a little underwhelmed by gameplay outside of boss fights. But if the boss fights can deliver, that might be fine. Like we said, the combat system is looking really good, and I'm particularly excited for all the different mechanics we'll be able to play with. Of course, you'll have a light and heavy attack with the staff, but it sounds like the heavy is a bit more nuanced than in most games. Multiple demo players mentioned that just tapping the heavy attack is pretty ineffective and locks you into a longer animation that puts you in a vulnerable position. It sounds like holding to charge the heavy attack does make it stronger, but what you really want to do is wait until you have some focus charges, and then use those to do a boosted heavy attack for a lot more damage. Focus is tracked with this gauge in the bottom right, and it builds up from landing hits and pulling off perfect dodges. Building up the focus bar all the way results in a charge, which you can then use to either do a stronger version of the heavy attack or power special moves that are unlocked via the skill trees. More on skills in a second, but it sounds like you'll be able to string multiple of those boosted heavy attacks and special moves together for powerful combos too. So to me, it's sounding like the basic combat loop will consist of dancing around an enemy, aiming to get perfect dodges when you can, and using the fast light attack combo when you get an opening to build up focus. And then, once you have some focus, using it to power stronger attacks that really knock an enemy's health down. Oh, and it's also worth noting that focus-powered attacks will actually heal you a bit too. Sounds like a nice little mechanic to throw in the mix. But that's far from the entire combat system. There are some other basics, of course, like managing your stamina, which is used to fuel dodging and sprinting. On top of that, it sounds like you won't be able to just spam dodge because there will be a recovery animation after the third dodge in a row. You'll also need to be keeping track of your healing gourd charges, of course, and I'm actually pretty interested to see what's up with the healing gourd because it sounds like there will be different potions you can choose to put in it that provide different bonuses, and the gourd itself might be upgradable too. I assume probably just to hold more charges, but maybe it can be given new attributes as well. It does sound like a poison mechanic is in the game, so I'd imagine there's some way to get a potion or a gourd attribute that counters that. But let's get back to the other aspects of the staff. In combat, you'll be able to swap between 3 different stances called Smash, Pillar, and Thrust, each granting unique abilities. Smash is the first one you'll have, and it seems pretty basic, just providing light and heavy attacks with combos for each. It's a bit hard to decipher what demo players were saying about this, but the combos from this stance might have the unique ability to interrupt enemy attacks if used correctly. So that might be the benefit of going with the basic Smash stance. Next, you'll unlock Pillar, which gives you the very cool ability to extend the staff and perch on top of it by holding heavy attack. This lets you avoid attacks at ground level, charge up focus, and unleash a devastating blow when the enemy gets too close. Though it looks like you'll lose a bit of stamina from attacks that hit the bottom of the staff, and you won't regain any stamina while hoisted in the air. The last stance is Thrust, and we don't know much about this one because the recent demo players weren't able to use it. We do see it in some footage though, and it seems like a more aggressive stance that allows the staff to be extended horizontally to basically jab an enemy. On top of staff stances, combos, and focus-powered special moves, you'll also have various magical spells and transformations in the mix. These are equipped in 4 customizable slots, they recharge passively, and at least some of them are gained by defeating bosses. For example, defeating Guangxi we mentioned earlier unlocks the Red Tide spell, which allows you to transform into him and use his abilities for a limited time. When you take on a new form, you'll also gain a brand new full health bar. So you can imagine using the transformations not only to gain access to cool abilities, but also as a panic button to save yourself when you're low on health and out of gourd charges. A bit like how you might use Rage in God of War. Beyond Red Tide, we know about a few other spells. Probably one of the mainstays is going to be Immobilize, which does exactly what you'd think, freezing an enemy in place for a moment. However, stronger enemies won't be frozen as long, and you won't be able to freeze bosses in the middle of their combos. We've also seen footage of Pluck of the Many, which I find really cool because it creates a bunch of Wukong clone decoys that distract an enemy for a little while. Stone Solid is one demo players reported on that we don't seem to have any footage of, but it's kind of the opposite of Immobilize, letting you freeze yourself for a moment for protection. Another one we have seen though is Ring of Fire, which will burn everything around you. But what I find even cooler about this one is that drinking from the gourd while inside the ring will actually heal you more than normal. Not sure if that's going to be explained explicitly in-game or not, but I love discovering little ability combinations like that. There's a number of other transformations we'll be able to use as well. So far, we've been able to confirm a cicada, bat, wolf, ape, toxic insects, and some sort of ball of earth, rock, and bone with legs. In the original Journey to the West novel, which the game is based on, Wukong can transform into literally dozens or hundreds of different forms, which would be unreasonable to expect in the game, but I imagine we'll see at least a few more. Another aspect of gameplay and combat are the 3 skill trees. We haven't seen any footage of these, but it's reported that one will consist of passive buffs for Wukong, a second will be focused on magic spells and transformations, and the third will be all about staff abilities and stance upgrades. I was also really happy to hear that skills can be respec'd anytime, which is always a nice quality of life feature. Skills will be unlocked by spending skill points called sparks, or at least that's what they're being called during development, and you'll get sparks by building up enough XP or will in combat. If you die, you can lose some of the will you've built up, but if you had a spark, you'll keep it. So doesn't sound too brutal in terms of leveling up. But another part of Black Myth I'm looking forward to is the gear system. Like many RPGs, gear will have multiple colored rarity levels. Armor will be broken into pieces, and you'll get a set bonus if you wear all the matching parts. Of course, any piece of armor is going to have stats associated with it like defense, but they can also have some special attributes, for example, poison resistance. And it also sounds like there will be an upgrade system for gear that you can use at the shrines. Beyond armor, it seems like we'll have some other accessories to equip too. For example, one of the demo players mentioned a circlet that allows drinking from the gourd while moving. Now, it's a little unclear at the moment, but there also seems to be either multiple different staffs to find, or at least some way to modify the staff with equipable items. I'm not sure if that means the staff can actually be modified to have different stats or attributes, or if these staff options are just cosmetic. But even if they are just cosmetic, I think that's pretty cool. Between attack combos, focus, stances, various skills, spells, transformations, and upgradable gear of different rarities, it's really sounding like there's going to be a ton of build potential, which has me pretty excited. Now, you've probably already heard that the game is based on the very popular Chinese novel Journey to the West, but in an interview with Eurogamer, the devs seem to indicate that Black Myth actually takes place after the story of Journey to the West. We did have some hints that this wasn't going to just be a straight retelling of the story. In my opinion, the most notable one is this trailer shot where our main character seems to encounter the actual Sun Wukong in his iconic golden armor. But we've also seen this much older monkey. My guess is this is also the actual Sun Wukong, but long after his adventures in Journey to the West, so maybe he's just retelling the story. But what's really strange is that we see what I assume is the main character awakened from a statue in this clip. Now, I'm not familiar with the novel, and you're probably not either, but I think we'd agree that these 3 apparently different versions of Sun Wukong, along with the dev comment about the story taking place after Journey to the West, definitely makes the whole narrative more mysterious and intriguing. My theory is that we play as some alternate version of Sun Wukong, reliving the memories of his adventures, but maybe going down a darker path for a little while, which does happen in the original story, and then being stopped by the actual Sun Wukong and put on the righteous path. Maybe they're making it a looping narrative in some way. The story in this game is something we really don't know much about beyond it being inspired by the novel, so I'm curious to see how it plays out. I personally like a good story in a game, so I'm hoping it turns out to be good, but I'm also concerned it could be pretty weird. I don't think many people have seen this on the developer's website, but there's a really strange trailer with a group of sisters talking about their mother marrying someone, and then at the end, it cuts to a shot of a giant spider in the courtyard where they were all talking, and you kind of get the sense that it either killed or ate them. You kind of have to see it for yourself to see how strange it is, and also how it really doesn't fit with anything else we've seen about the game. I'll link it below for you, and maybe I'll do another video on that stuff if I can dig up more. I'll link that video right here if I do, or my first video after the game launches. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.